An appeals court has just upheld the $83 million defamation judgment E. Jean Carroll won against President Trump. Let's go live right now to CNN's Kara Scannell. Kara, the president lost the appeal, so what happens now?
Well, the president did lose this appeal, and he already set aside money in order to pay E. Jean Carroll, but the litigation here is most likely not over. Donald Trump's lawyers releasing a statement in which they said that they will continue to fight this and that they said the defense will be taken over by the Department of Justice.
Okay, so let me just say this right off the bat. September 8th, 2025. That's the date. That's when everything exploded again. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. Another Trump story, another courtroom, another massive headline. But hold on, because this one's different. This one just became real in a way that even his biggest critics didn't see coming. $83.3 million. Let that number sit with you for a second. Not 83,000, not 800,000, 83 million with an M, and it's not going away. The appeals court just said, nope, you're paying it, every single penny. And here's the kicker. Trump stormed out, like literally got up and walked out of the courtroom when the ruling came down. Can you believe this? The sitting president of the United States storming out of a federal courtroom because a 3-judge panel just told him he's on the hook for one of the largest defamation judgments in American history. This is wild, right? I mean, come on. We're talking about E. Jean Carroll, the writer, the woman who accused Trump of sexually assaulting her back in the 1990s in a department store. And Trump, he called her a liar over and over. On social media, in interviews, at rallies, he went after her reputation like it was a political opponent. And now the bill has come due. But here's what makes this moment so incredibly important and why you need to understand what just happened. This isn't just about one case. This isn't just about one woman's accusations or one man's denials. This is about whether the most powerful person in the country can say whatever he wants about anyone and just walk away. This is about whether being president gives you a free pass to destroy someone's life with your words. And the court just answered that question loudly. They said, no, you don't get immunity for this. No, you can't hide behind the Oval Office. No, you're not above the law. Let me break down what actually happened here, because the media has been all over the place with this story. And honestly, most people are missing the bigger picture.
The verdict that Trump defamed writer E. Jean Carroll and that he must pay her $83 million in damages.
Yeah, we all heard about the trial earlier this year. We heard about the jury decision back in January 2024. $83 million, massive headlines. But Trump's team immediately said they'd appeal. They said this verdict was ridiculous, that it was politically motivated, that it would get overturned. And a lot of people, even people who don't like Trump, figured, yeah, maybe it will. Appeals courts overturn stuff all the time, right? Wrong. The Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, 3 judges, unanimous decision, looked at this case and said the jury got it right. In fact, they went further. They called Trump's behavior remarkably high, perhaps unprecedented. Those are their words, not mine, not some liberal commentators, the court's actual words. And then they described his attacks on Carroll as extraordinary and egregious. Again, direct quote from the ruling. This is a federal appeals court saying that what Trump did was so far over the line that it deserved one of the biggest defamation penalties ever awarded in American history. So why did Trump storm out? Well, think about it. This is a guy who spent his entire adult life believing that if you fight hard enough, if you appeal long enough, if you delay long enough, you can make problems go away. That's been his legal strategy forever. Sue, countersue, appeal, settle, move on. It's worked for him dozens of times, hundreds maybe, but not this time. This time, the court looked at his presidential immunity defense, the thing his lawyers thought was their ace in the hole, and they basically laughed it out of the room. They said, yeah, we saw that Supreme Court ruling from July 2024, the one that gave presidents more immunity for official acts. Nice try. But this isn't an official act. This is you personally attacking a private citizen. This is defamation, and you're paying for it. Here's the thing that's really getting under people's skin right now, the money. Let's talk about the actual breakdown, because it's not just one lump sum. $65 million in punitive damages. That's the punishment part. That's the court saying you need to learn a lesson here and it's going to cost you. Then there's $18.3 million in compensatory damages. That's the part that's supposed to make Carroll whole again, to compensate her for the damage to her reputation, her career, her emotional well-being. But wait, there's more.
Out of office. It went to trial when he was out of office, but now he is saying it should be handled by the Justice Department as this moves forward. Now, the next step here would be a challenge to the U.S. Supreme Court. That is certainly something that the Trump administration can attempt to do, and it would be up to the justices to decide.
Because this verdict came down in January 2024, and since then, interest has been piling up every single day, every single month. We're talking millions more added to that total. So by the time Trump actually has to cut a check, if he ever does, it's going to be even higher than 83 million. And this is where it gets really interesting. Trump's lawyers tried everything. They argued presidential immunity. They argued the jury was biased. They argued the damages were excessive. They basically threw every legal argument at the wall to see what would stick. In the appeals court, they swatted down every single one by one, like not even close. The lawyer for Carroll came out after the ruling and said something that's been echoing everywhere. No one is above the law, including the president. Simple statement, 5 seconds long, but it cuts right to the heart of what this case is really about. Because for years, decades really, Trump has operated like the rules don't apply to him, and his supporters love that about him. They see it as strength. They see it as him fighting the system. But his critics, they see it as corruption. They see it as a man who thinks he's untouchable, and now the courts are saying, you're not untouchable, not even close. All right, so let's dig into this, because there's a lot going on beneath the surface that most people aren't talking about. And honestly, that's where the real story is. Because this case is not happening in a vacuum. It's happening right in the middle of the most chaotic political moment in modern American history. Trump is the sitting president. Let that sink in. He's not some former politician fighting old battles. He's in the White House right now. And he's also fighting, 4, 5? Multiple civil and criminal cases across different states.
Attacks against Carroll, saying they became, quote, more extreme and frequent as the trial approached. A different jury in May 2023 found Trump liable to Carroll for sexual abuse and defamation, but not rape, and awarded her $5 million. The appeals court upheld that verdict in June.
This is unprecedented. Like actually unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this before. And here's what makes the Carroll case so explosive. It's about something deeply personal: sexual assault allegations, defamation, a woman saying a powerful man attacked her and then destroyed her reputation when she spoke out. This isn't some financial crime or some abstract legal theory. This is visceral. This is emotional. And both sides, Trump's base and his opponents, are locked into completely opposite realities about what happened. Let me paint the picture for you. E. Jean Carroll says Trump assaulted her in a Bergdorf Goodman dressing room in the mid-1990s. She didn't come forward publicly until 2019. When she did, Trump immediately denied it, but he didn't just deny it. He went further. He said he'd never met her. He said she wasn't his type. He mocked her story. He called her a liar over and over in public statements on True Social, in interviews. And that's where the defamation comes in. Because even if you believe Trump's side of the story, even if you think the assault never happened, the courts have now said twice that his statements about Carroll were false and damaging. The first trial in 2023 found him liable for sexual abuse and defamation. That was a $5 million judgment. Then, because Trump kept talking, kept attacking Carroll even after that verdict, she sued him again. And that's where this $83 million judgment comes from. Think about that for a second. He lost once, paid $5 million. Well, technically he's still appealing that one too. But the point is, he lost. And instead of stopping, instead of moving on, he doubled down. He kept attacking her. And the jury said, okay, if you're not going to learn, we're going to make it hurt. $65 million in punitive damages. That's not about compensating Carroll. That's about punishing Trump. That's about sending a message. Now, here's where it gets really complicated. Trump's legal team tried to use the Supreme Court's presidential immunity ruling from July 2024. And if you've been following politics at all, you know that ruling was huge. Massive implications. The Supreme Court basically said that presidents have broad immunity for official acts, things they do as part of their job, criminal prosecutions, civil suits. There's a shield there that didn't exist before, or at least wasn't as clear. Trump's lawyers looked at that ruling and thought, jackpot, we can use this. We can argue that Trump's statements about Carroll were part of his official duties, responding to accusations against him as president. And honestly, on paper, it's not the worst argument. Presidents do have to respond to allegations. They do have to defend their reputation. That's part of the job, right? But the appeals court wasn't buying it. Not for a second. They said, nice try, but no. Because here's the thing. Trump wasn't just responding as president. He was attacking a private citizen in deeply personal terms. He wasn't issuing some carefully worded official statement. He was calling her names.
Second ruling from the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in the second E. Jean Carroll trial. You'll remember E. Jean Carroll went to trial against President Trump twice. The first of her verdicts was upheld by this same court. That was for a $5 million award.
He was mocking her appearance. He was doing what Trump does, going for the throat. And the court said that's not official conduct. That's personal. And you're responsible for it. This is huge, people, because it sets a boundary. It says, yeah, presidents have immunity for a lot of things, but not for this, not for personally attacking someone and destroying their reputation. That's not part of the job description. And you can see why Trump stormed out, right? because this was supposed to be his get out of jail free card. This was supposed to be the thing that made all these legal problems go away. And instead, the court just told him, nope, you're still on the hook. Let me throw some numbers at you because I think this helps put things in perspective. $83.3 million, that's the base judgment. But with interest accumulating since January 2024, we're talking about an additional amount that's probably in the millions by now. Let's say conservatively it's grown to around 85 or 86 million, maybe more. Now Trump's worth what? Depends who you ask, right? He says he's worth billions. Forbes says it's more like $2.5 billion. Other estimates are lower, but even if we take the high end, $85 million is real money. That's not couch cushion change. That's a significant hit to his net worth. And here's the thing, Trump's liquid cash situation, not great. A lot of his wealth is tied up in real estate, in properties, in the Trump brand. He can't just write a check for $85 million tomorrow without it hurting. He'd have to liquidate assets, take out loans, do some financial gymnastics. And you know what that means? That means this verdict. It's not just symbolic, it has teeth. But let's talk about the politics for a second, because that's really what this is about for a lot of people. Trump's base looks at this case and sees persecution. They see a liberal writer making accusations decades after the fact. They see a New York jury, New York of all places, which voted overwhelmingly against Trump, handing down a massive judgment. They see appeals court stacked with judges appointed by Democrats. And they say, this is lawfare. This is the system trying to take down a political enemy. And honestly, I get why they think that. The timing is suspicious, right? Carroll comes forward in 2019, right when Trump's running for re-election. The case has moved through the courts, and now we're in 2025. Trump's back in office, and suddenly this judgment gets upheld. It feels coordinated, it feels political, but here's the other side. Trump's critics look at this and see accountability. Finally, they see a man who spent his entire life dodging consequences, bankruptcies, lawsuits, scandals, and now for once, the system is holding him responsible. They see a woman who was brave enough to come forward, who faced death threats and harassment, who stood up to one of the most powerful men in the world and won twice. So who's right? Well, that depends on what you believe about the underlying facts. Did Trump assault Carroll in that dressing room? I can't tell you. I wasn't there. The jury heard the evidence and said, yeah, we believe her. The appeals court upheld that. But if you're a Trump supporter, you probably think the whole thing is fabricated. And if you're a Trump critic, you probably think he got off easy. That's where we are as a country right now. Two completely different realities. In this case, it's a perfect example of that divide. Let me hit you with one more angle here because I think this is important.
$3.3 million verdict against President Trump still holds, and it is accumulating interest over time, so that ultimately, if the Supreme Court either upholds it or rejects the challenge by President Trump.
Trump's legal strategy has always been delay, tie things up in appeals, drag cases out for years, hope the other side runs out of money or energy. And a lot of times, it works, but not this time. Carroll's legal team has been relentless. They funded this case, and by the way, Carroll's got some serious financial backing now. Donors, legal funds, people who want to see Trump held accountable, so she's not running out of resources. In the courts, they're moving relatively quickly. This verdict came down in January 2024. The appeal was decided in September 2025. That's fast for the legal system, and that means Trump's running out of options. He can try to appeal to the Supreme Court, and he probably will, but the odds of them taking this case, pretty low. The appeals court decision was unanimous. The legal reasoning was solid. There's no circuit split to resolve. The Supreme Court usually doesn't take cases just to overturn a lower court when there's no compelling reason. So what does that mean? It means Trump's probably going to have to pay, eventually, whether that's next month or next year or after some more legal wrangling. It's coming. Okay, so let's bring this all together, because I want to make sure you understand why this matters. Not just for Trump, not just for Carroll, but for all of us, for how we think about power, accountability, and what it means to be president in 2025. First, let's talk about presidential immunity, because this is the heart of the legal fight and it's going to keep coming up in other cases. The Supreme Court ruling from July 2024, the one Trump's team tried to use, it said presidents have immunity for official acts, things they do as part of their job. Prosecuting that is really hard now, maybe impossible in some cases. But here's the key distinction the appeals court made. Personal conduct, stuff you do as an individual, not as president, that's not covered. If Trump had issued an official White House statement saying these allegations are false and I'm cooperating with any investigation, that might be protected. But going on social media and calling someone a liar, mocking their appearance, that's personal. That's you as Donald Trump, the individual, not Donald Trump, the president. And the court said you don't get immunity for that, period. This is actually a pretty important line to draw, because if presidents had immunity for everything they said or did, ever, while in office. That would be insane. That would mean you could defame anyone, commit any personal wrong, and just claim, hey, I was president at the time, can't touch me. That's not how the law works. That's not how it should work. So the appeals court drew a line. Official acts, protected. Personal attacks, not protected. And yeah, Trump's team is going to argue about where that line is in every single case. But in this case, the line seems pretty clear. Second point, let's talk about the money again, because I want to make sure you understand the breakdown. $65 million in punitive damages, $18.3 million in compensatory damages, plus interest that's been accumulating for over a year and a half now. Punitive damages are supposed to punish and deter. The jury looked at Trump's net worth, billions of dollars, and said, okay, if we're going to actually make him feel this, it's got to be huge. $5 million didn't work. He kept talking, so let's try $65 million. Maybe that'll get his attention. Compensatory damages are supposed to make the victim whole. $18 million for Carroll. That's supposed to cover the damage to her reputation, her emotional distress, her career. Is it too much? Trump's team says yes. They say it's wildly excessive. But the jury disagreed, and now 2 courts have upheld it. Here's what's interesting. The appeals court could have reduced the damages if they thought they were unreasonable. They have that power, but they didn't. They left the full $83 million intact. That tells you something. That tells you they think the jury got it right. And the interest, that's standard in civil cases. From the date of judgment until it's paid, interest accrues. It's usually based on federal rates or state rates, depending on the jurisdiction. And it adds up fast. Over a year and a half, we're talking millions. So by the time Trump actually pays, if he pays, it's going to be well over $85 million, maybe closer to 90. Third, let's talk about what Trump supporters are saying, because this is important to understand. They're saying this is a witch hunt. They're saying Carroll's accusations are decades old and convenient. They're saying the jury in Manhattan was biased. Of course they were. It's New York. They're saying the damages are absurd. No defamation case should be worth $83 million.
That jury awarded her $5 million. Then they also had a second lawsuit that went to trial that was just focused on the defamation. And it's that decision, that is this $83.3 million verdict, that the jury had awarded Carroll.
And look, some of those arguments have merit. The timing is suspect. The jury pool in Manhattan is overwhelmingly anti-Trump, and $83 million is a massive number, way higher than most defamation cases. But here's the counter-argument. Trump's not a normal defendant. He's one of the most powerful people on the planet. When he attacks someone, he's got millions of followers amplifying it. The damage he can do to someone's reputation is enormous. So yeah, the penalty should be enormous too. That's the logic. And as for the jury being biased, well, the appeals court looked at that argument and rejected it. They said Trump had a fair trial. His lawyers were there. They presented evidence. The jury heard both sides. If Trump didn't like the jury pool, he could have asked for a change of venue before the trial. He didn't. So sorry, but you can't lose and then complain about the rules after the fact. Fourth, let's zoom out and talk about the bigger picture. Trump is fighting multiple legal battles right now. Criminal cases, civil cases, state level, federal level. This is unprecedented. We've never had a sitting president dealing with this many legal problems at once. And every single case has political implications. Every verdict, every ruling, every appeal, it becomes a campaign issue. Trump's base rallies around him harder every time he loses. They see it as proof that the system is rigged. His opponents see it as proof that he's finally being held accountable. The Carroll case is just one piece of this puzzle, but it's an important piece because it's about personal conduct. It's not about January 6th or classified documents or financial crimes. It's about how Trump treats people, how he talks about women, how he responds to accusations. And for a lot of voters, especially women voters, that matters a lot. Here's the thing most people don't realize. This case could have been settled quietly. Trump could have issued an apology, not admitting guilt, just saying I shouldn't have said those things. He could have paid Carroll some amount of money to make it go away. This never had to become an $83 million judgment. But Trump doesn't do that. He doesn't back down. He doesn't apologize. He fights everything, everywhere, all the time. And sometimes that strategy works. It fires up his base. It makes him look strong. But sometimes it backfires. Like now, because if he just stopped talking about Carroll after the first trial, if he just moved on, there wouldn't be a second judgment. There wouldn't be an additional $65 million in punitive damages. But he couldn't help himself. He had to keep attacking her, and now he's paying for it, literally. So what happens next? Well, Trump's team will almost certainly try to appeal to the Supreme Court. They'll argue that this case raises important questions about presidential immunity and First Amendment rights. They'll say the damages are unconstitutionally excessive. Will the Supreme Court take the case? Probably not. They only take a small fraction of the cases appealed to them. In this one, there's no circuit split. The legal issues aren't new. The appeals court was unanimous. There's really no reason for the Supreme Court to step in, but Trump's going to try anyway. because that's what he does. And even if the Supreme Court refuses to hear it, that'll take months, more delay, more time before he has to actually pay. And in the meantime, this is a campaign issue now. Trump's already using it in speeches. He's telling his supporters that this is persecution, that $83 million for saying someone's lying is insane, that the whole system is corrupt, and his base believes him. They're donating more money. They're showing up to rallies. They're more fired up than ever. But here's the flip side. Independent voters, especially women, are watching this, and some of them are thinking, wait, this guy was found liable for sexual abuse. A jury said he defamed his accuser. An appeals court upheld it. Maybe there's something to this. So politically, this case cuts both ways. It energizes Trump's base, but it also reminds voters why they don't like him. Let me wrap this up with one final thought. This case, the Carroll verdict, Trump storming out of court, the $83 million, it's all part of a larger story about accountability, about whether powerful people can get away with anything, about whether the legal system can actually hold a president responsible for personal misconduct. And the answer, at least in this case, is yes. Yes, you can be held accountable. Yes, there are limits to presidential immunity. Yes, you have to pay when you defame someone. That's a big deal. Whether you love Trump or hate him, that's a big deal. Because for years, decades really, Trump has operated in a different world. A world where lawsuits get settled, where accusations get buried, where consequences never quite land. And now, they're landing. $83 million upheld on appeal. Storming out of court doesn't change it. Claiming persecution doesn't change it. The bill is due, and here's the kicker. This might just be the beginning. Because if the courts are willing to hold Trump accountable in this case, what about the others? What about the criminal cases? What about the other civil suits? Suddenly, Trump's legal strategy of delay and deny doesn't look so bulletproof anymore. So yeah, September 8th, 2025, the day the appeals court said, nope, you're paying. The day Trump walked out of a courtroom, knowing he's on the hook for one of the biggest defamation judgments in history. And the day we all got a reminder that no one, not even the president, is completely above the law. We'll see where this goes next. Because trust me, this story is far from over.